one of the things that we want to talk about today is tomorrow. Tomorrow is the 45th annual March for Life, and Ryan and Jeremy and I, describe ourselves as comprehensively womb to tomb pro-life. And we would agree with you that any one abortion is tragic and heartbreaking, and we would also agree with you that there are significant issues with Planned Parenthood, and that they really are a bad actor in the realm of women's health and abortion services under the guise of reproductive health. 2016 saw the lowest abortion rate since 1973, and we haven't really been able to track down the 2017 numbers here. And so my question is this. Our goal is ultimately that abortion become irrelevant, which requires more than what Congress can do. But what can Congress do in order to accomplish our stated goal of abortion irrelevance?
Okay. Well, first of all, Phillip, there are 5 pieces of legislation right now that are actually in the process of being considered. One is called, and I'm a co-sponsor of all 5 of them. One's called the Conscience Protection Act. One's called the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. One's called the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act. Anyway, they're all essentially the same thing. The easiest way to do this has always been for me saying, if you really believe that life begins at conception, then you're taking a life. Now, and
Sure.
there are more people involved in that. I had a program the other day that I did. It was actually a national program where they had someone who was a nurse who actually was pro-abortion at one time until she witnessed what was going on. So we're going to have all day tomorrow is going to be, 600,000 people or 1 million people. I don't know how many are going to end up being there, but that is an issue that is still alive and well, and we are making progress.
Sure. Yeah, and that's great. And we were looking at the statistics on that, and although it's one of those things that we don't necessarily celebrate that the abortion statistics have dropped since to the lowest point since '73, it makes us less sad. So there's been a lot of progress, and both legislatively and as a culture. I mean, I think the research that I've seen is that millennials actually are more pro-life than even their older counterparts.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, you use that, the word culture. I think all the time. At my age, I don't have to worry too much about how many years I'm going to be around. It's not going to be all that many. You never know for sure. But 100 years from now or 50 years from now, they'll look back and say there was a culture where we murdered helpless babies. I mean, you can't sugarcoat that takes place. When you talk about the fact that there are less now taking place than there were before, one painful murder is one too many. But we're doing everything we can now. Our movement is alive and well, and let's wait and see how it looks tomorrow and how many minds we can change. And then when the elections come up, regenerate that as an issue again. Because, with all the problems we have right now, of what's happened to our military under the Obama 8 years and some of the problems that we've had, people are they're forgetting that is still a serious issue.
So I want to change gears here. So the big story of this year is should be the tax bill, which was just passed, and you voted for it. And so after taking a look at the bill, I can say that I personally, my family, is actually going to benefit from it. Primarily, our benefit will come from the child tax credit that was expanded and lobbied for by Senator Rubio at the last minute. So in all sincerity, when you see him next, please thank Senator Rubio for me, if you would.
Oh, I will do that. Yes, yeah, I will. And it does so many things that people don't understand, because when they tried to use this this language that it's for the rich and at the expense of the poor, it's just an outrageous lie. As you mentioned, the individual rates have been cut substantially. It doubles the standard deduction, doubles the child tax credit. That's $2,000 a child instead of $1,000. And so, and the corporate rates, that's significant too. Here's what happens, if you don't mind my being a little bit more expansive in this area.
Yeah, please do.
This actually started under John Kennedy many years ago. He's the one who said, when he was president of the United States, that we need more revenue into government, and the best way to increase government revenue is to reduce taxes. Well, that was a novel idea, and he did it, and it worked. And then along came Ronald Reagan in 1981, and in 1981, this is you can be specific about this, and this is all from memory because I've used this example for so many years now. In 1981, it cost $469 billion to run government. That's all the money that came in. He made major reductions in rates. The top rate went down from 70 to 50, and then comparable reductions elsewhere. Now, as a result of that, that increased the revenue into government from $469 billion to $750 billion. Now, that's exactly what is going to happen. One of the reasons, one of the beneficiaries that I look at in the future is going to be our military, because we're going to be able to get back and treat the military as we should be treating it. Now, if there's anyone out there who questions what I'm saying right now, we have a website. If you don't mind, Phillip, I'd like to have you kind of remind people of this. It's inhofe.senate.gov. Now, on this website, I've listed 124 corporations doing business in Oklahoma that are making substantial changes now as a result of this tax bill passing. As an example, I came up on American Airlines on Monday. The flight attendant didn't know who I was, but she was celebrating. She had a check for $1,000. And then the other flight attendant said the same thing. Every employee of American Airlines outside of the officers got a bonus. And so that's happening all over. Walmart, every employee of Walmart right now is the beneficiary of either a raise, a bonus, or something else.
And that's true, but we also saw that within the same day that they announced the Walmart increasing their minimum wage to $11, that they also announced that they were closing a significant portion of their Sam's Clubs as well. So my question, though, is the short-term benefit that I saw that we're seeing here. Budget deficits are not partisan, and deficits really don't care about party. And so for a guy like me who thinks that debt and deficits are a big deal, as I look at the Democrats starting to talk about deficits this year, I'm like, where have you been for the past 10 years?
Yeah, where have you been? That's right.
And then I look at the Republicans, and since the deficit conversation has kind of died down on that part of the aisle, I say, where did you go? And so my question really is this: are deficits and debt always going to be the concern for the minority party as they seek political advantage, or will we reach a point where actual and effective deficit and debt reduction policies can be formulated in a way that can survive the partisan power swings of Congress and the White House?
Well, now's the time to talk about that, because what we're trying to do, there are some things that are partisan, just definitely partisan. For instance, when you talk about the pro-life movement, the pro-abortionists they're the Democrats, and you don't find any of them that are on our side of the issue. A strong national defense, that's a partisan issue. Republicans are for it. Democrats go along with. They went along with Obama when he said you can't do anything for military unless you do it for the social programs. Gun control, that's a partisan issue. And it happens that the deficit spending is also partisan. And when you said where have they been, I don't know where they've been, because all of a sudden they were using that as an argument to oppose the tax reforms that are taking place, and yet they are already increasing the revenue coming into to address the debt problem. I've already given an example of what happened in the 80s, and that's happening right now. Now, I want to mention one thing. Walmart did not close any stores in Oklahoma, and I want to make sure that we get that into the record, because I'm not sure where that issue is taken care of. That's one of the things we checked into. This is a good program. It's one that is partisan, and the only reason the Democrats are trying to use the deficit or debt argument that they've never been cared about before is that they just don't want to have a victory going to this president. By the way, back in one other thing I think people would be interested in, for the first time, I think in history, President Trump is going to be addressing the pro-life crowd tomorrow. We have not had a president that has done that in the past. So that's a
And
big deal.
That's definitely. Yeah, that's definitely commendable. Senator Inhofe, this is Jeremy Coleman, and I'm the GM here at Crossover Radio. We're really grateful for your time this morning. Just quick question for you. Talking about the tax reform and all the things going forward like that, it seems like with the tax reform, the less involved President Trump was during the process of that bill making it through Congress, the better the legs were on it. And then it seems like the more involved at times that he gets, either A, on Twitter, or B, when he was actively campaigning for Roy Moore down in Alabama and things of that nature, it seems like there is a major pushback, not only from the other side of the aisle, but even kind of disenfranchised conservatives. My question to you is this, do you think that it is better for the president to kind of fly under the radar at times because his figure has been so polarizing, so that Congress can get things accomplished like the tax bill, versus when he is extremely adamant and vocal and outspoken, it seems that there's a greater pushback and it's harder to get things accomplished when he's active, a la that Senate campaign down in Alabama when he actively campaigned for Roy Moore.
Yeah, well, let me defend him a little bit now because, he is very abrasive in some of the language that he uses. But he almost has to do that. This morning, I had a couple of friends that were on CNN. I never watched CNN. I could not believe how wrong they were on every issue. They hate Trump and hate him with a passion. So I think Trump has discovered a way of bypassing, getting by the media that's so unfair to him, and he's done it successfully. I'm going to give you two examples. First of all, on the tax bill, I have to give him a lot more credit than you're giving him because I was there with him. I was actually in the White House with him, and he worked this thing out. He negotiated it and got it done, and it's just unbelievable that I never believed he'd be able to do it. Some of the things that he says, like his response to Kim Jong-un in North Korea, when he came out and said, I have the button now, we demonstrated on, I'm talking about North Korea now, we demonstrated on November the 28th that we can hit the continental United States. We have the equipment to do that now, and I have the button and I can use it. And then his response was, the president's response was, yeah, I got a bigger button and we'll blow you off the map because we have the targeting capability you don't have if that should happen. All of a sudden, the next day, the president of North Korea called up the South Korea and said, we're going to come to the Winter Olympics after all, and we want to start negotiating. So I don't know, let's give him a little bit of a break here because he's doing things non-conventionally, but they have to be done. When you
I'm sorry, Senator. To Jeremy's point, what we're seeing is the times where the president is actually doing what we would say that is a stronger suit of negotiating in the room behind closed doors, being the deal maker that he ran on, are the times where we see is successful. But the times where he is bombastic and unorthodox, either on social media or in the press or whatever, are the times that he's actually doing his own agenda a disservice, because the focus then at that point is the palace intrigue, not necessarily the policy. And so my question would be this: is that do you see the times that when he is using that unorthodox style actually having a marked and negative effect on policy?
Well, I gave two examples that were both positive effect on policy. I think probably you could argue that way right now because what we're facing between now and tomorrow night, that he does have the policy sometimes of painting himself into a corner, but then he has to try to get out, and he's been able to do it so far, but it hasn't been easy. So I think I don't disagree with you that is a problem. But again, you stop and think about, we had an election, and the election was between two people in the final analysis. That was Hillary and him. If you stop and think what would have happened to America, what would have happened to the pro-life movement, what would have happened to the Second Amendment rights, all these things, America would have changed in a way that would have been, in my opinion, disastrous. So this he's no Ronald Reagan. But his style is abrasive, and he's getting some things done. And on balance, I'm really supporting this guy.
That's the quote of the day so far. Is that he is no Ronald Reagan. Thank you for that, Senator. And so, last question. I know your time is precious, but I did want to bring up the Senate bill you're sponsoring to address the wildfires.
That's huge.
California.
Yeah.
And you, of course.
Well, the reason, and I really appreciate the fact that you're letting me do this, because it's not confined to problems just in western Oklahoma. It happened when they had the wildfire out there. I got in 3 different trips. I flew my plane out there to fly over it to get a better idea of what's happening. And you see cattle that are being burned alive. You see the problems. And as a result of that, we introduced a bill. And we're going to pass it. And in fact, the first person I went to be a co-sponsor is a very popular Democrat senator from New Mexico. So it does essentially 3 things. First of all, people in some of the rural areas are not familiar with some of these terms, but CRP lands is called the Conservation Reserve Program, and so there are restrictions as to what you can do with cattle on these lands. Well, this bill opens these lands up in the case of a disaster. It doesn't have to be a wildfire. It could be anything else, but allows them to do that, because we had a lot of cattle that were having a hard time staying alive because their fields were all burned. So that's number 1. Number 2, we have the FEMA program only addresses residents. And so as I looked over there, I saw the fence rows, for example. They are about $10,000 a mile, just hundreds of them destroyed. So we've changed the language of FEMA, and they will now reimburse for other agricultural activities, not just the home residents. And the third thing, if you talk to any banker who's listening to us right now, they'll tell you the worst thing that's happened to the banking industry is the overregulation that came under Obama. It's called the Dodd-Frank legislation. And so what we're doing is allowing these community banks who want to help people, farmers, ranchers that were hurt in that disaster, be able to break some of their lending ceilings so that they can help the people that really need help. Those are 3 major things, and when I had a meeting out there in western Oklahoma last Friday, and they were very appreciative. They're excited about it, and this is going to make a huge difference the next time we have a disaster. And it may not be a wildfire, it may be a tornado or something else.
Well, sure, and that's one of the things I want to lead into. And this last question, like I said, I know your time is precious, and so we see that often, whether it be during Hurricane Sandy or Hurricane Harvey this past year, that we see what is perceived to be kind of these partisan fights and partisan saber rattling in games. I think we can all agree that Americans are by their nature generous, but we also want to be wise in the face of disaster. So talk to me about how this Senate bill that you're introducing accomplishes the goals of making sure that we are one nation and that we take care of our fellow citizens in the times of disaster, but we're also doing it in a fiscally responsible way.
Okay, and I agree with that. And again, this is not even scored at this time. Scoring takes place when you introduce bills as to what it's going to cost. And right now there are offsets on this that are going to take care of that, such as the CRP lands. Well, that's something, there's no money attached to that. So that's something that is very generous to the people who are hurt the most, but it doesn't cost anybody anything on the other side. In terms of the banks, that was an overregulation thing. I'm not a banker, but you talk to any bankers and they'll tell you they should have the latitude of making loans where they can help the most people and still be secure. And so that falls into the category. So I think you're looking at something here that the only area where the cost could increase would be in the expansion of FEMA's role. But that's just one small part of a bill that covers several things. I think that's a good example of being successful in that area.
Senator Inhofe, once again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on again. We always enjoy the conversation and enjoy an opportunity to talk with you and all of our elected leaders. And just thanks for the work that you do in Washington, D.C.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you guys.